3 ordinary pennies, 3 massive mistakes, and now they're worth a fortune. A 1999 penny with a subtle minting flaw has shocked collectors with sales as high as $110,000. A 1995 D penny once overlooked in circulation? Now it's turning heads at $95,000. And the quiet 1980 penny hiding a rare doubling error has been auctioned for up to $90,000. Think your change is worthless? Think again, one of these could be in your pocket right now. In 1999, the U.S. Mint was operating under a unique confluence of urgency and transformation. The approach of a new millennium brought heightened national sentiment, technology concerns over the Y2K bug, and shifting priorities within the Mint itself. While preparations were underway for the debut of the 50-state quarters program in the following year, regular coin production was moving steadily forward, almost mechanically. The Lincoln cent remained unchanged in design, still bearing the familiar visage of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, a design that had been in place since 1959. Nothing in the official record suggested 1999 would be an extraordinary year for the penny. Yet, quietly and without fanfare, something slipped past the rigorous processes of coin production. The 1-cent coins produced in 1999 were struck in both Philadelphia and Denver, using copper-plated zinc planchets, a composition introduced in 1982 to replace the costlier bronze alloy. Billions of these pennies were minted, and the design was so ubiquitous that it often escaped close scrutiny. But the speed and pressure of production sometimes introduced anomalies, small, seemingly trivial details that could snowball into numismatic significance. Somewhere between the creation of dies, the handling of planchets, and the final striking, an error occurred that would go unnoticed for years. Miles away, a lifelong collector in rural Kentucky, named Harold, had made a tradition of examining every coin that passed through his hands. He didn't look for wealth, he looked for stories, imperfections, something that felt out of place. One rainy afternoon, while sorting through a modest collection of pennies he'd accumulated over time, his eyes caught something peculiar. The 1999 Lincoln cent in his hand felt off, not visually, at first, but in weight. It had a different tactile sensation, slightly heavier than the others in the same pile. Suspicious, he dropped it gently on his wooden desk. It rang, a crisp, almost metallic chime that wasn't typical for copper-plated zinc. Curiosity piqued, he reached for his precision scale. The reading was unmistakable, 3.1 grams. That was the standard weight of a pre-1982 bronze cent, not the 2.5 grams expected from a post-1982 zinc version. Harold blinked, confused. He tried again, even using a second scale to confirm. The results were the same. But the date on the coin was clearly 1999. It should have been struck on zinc. He turned the coin over slowly. It looked otherwise ordinary. No glaring off-center strike, no doubling, no clipped planchet. But under the magnifier, he began to notice subtle clues. The surface bore an unusually rich tone, deeper than the dull hue of zinc coins. The rim was fuller, crisper. The strike had more depth, especially in the fine lines of Lincoln's coat and the pillars of the memorial. This wasn't just an overweight fluke. This was a 1999 cent struck on a bronze planchet, a composition that had been discontinued 17 years earlier. Unable to suppress his excitement, Harold sent the coin for professional grading. The weight felt endless. He knew the odds. Maybe it was a foreign blank, a fabrication, or a damaged counterfeit. But when the coin returned encased in a plastic slab, the label confirmed what he had hoped: 1999 Lincoln cent, struck on bronze planchet. What had happened? Somewhere in the vast machinery of the mint, a leftover blank from decades earlier, possibly hidden in a corner bin or lodged in older feeder equipment, had re-entered the system. It had bypassed inspection, entered the striking chamber, and emerged indistinguishable from its zinc counterpart save for the sound, weight, and subtle coloring. The mint never reported such a find in 1999. It hadn't even been a suspected error year for the cent. And yet, here it was. As the news of Harold's discovery slowly made its way through collector forums and numismatic circles, others began checking their own 1999 cents more carefully. A handful of similar examples surfaced, each rare, each debated. Some were confirmed to be authentic bronze planchet strikes. Others were struck on foreign planchets intended for overseas coinage. The mint, after all, frequently produced coins for other nations, and a stray blank from such a production run could easily have caused the anomaly. The market's reaction was cautious at first. Error coins often follow erratic paths in terms of value. Rarity doesn't always guarantee demand. But this error had something more, a mystery, a deviation from modern production expectations, and a direct link to a past composition long thought phased out. The earliest sales of authenticated 1999 bronze planchet errors drew offers in the low thousands, then crept higher as more collectors began chasing them. By 2010, auction houses had begun listing these coins with growing frequency, though their numbers remained incredibly scarce. With proper certification, they fetched serious attention. One piece in particular, graded in mint state condition with a flawless strike and unblemished surface, ignited a bidding war at a West Coast coin show. The final hammer price stunned even seasoned dealers. At first glance, the 1999 bronze cent error may seem like a small footnote in the broader history of American coinage. But as time passed, its significance deepened. It wasn't just a mistake, it was an echo. A ghost of an older era that had managed to sneak into the final year of the century. For many collectors, it represented a beautiful contradiction, a modern date on an obsolete medium. It challenged assumptions, demanded scrutiny, and rewarded those who paid attention to the smallest of details, and just when collectors thought they understood the full scope of the 1999 error, another twist emerged. One coin, sent for reanalysis in 2017, exhibited chemical composition characteristics that deviated from both standard bronze and copper-plated zinc. It suggested the use of a transitional alloy, something possibly experimental or unrecorded. This revelation cracked the door to new theories. Was there a quiet test run of an alternate composition? Could this have been an intentional strike for calibration or training purposes? Or had the mint repurposed old stock without formal acknowledgement? These questions remain unanswered. The mint has never issued a statement confirming how or why these 1999 bronze cents exist. That silence only fuels their mystique. Today, the value of a verified 1999 Lincoln cent struck on a bronze planchet depends on grade, strike clarity, and surface preservation. Lower grade examples have sold in the range of $5,000 to $15,000. But the finest known specimens, those with pristine mint state condition and clean diagnostics, have commanded prices soaring above $40,000, with experts estimating their potential to reach or exceed six figures as collector demand intensifies. A single coin. A date easily overlooked. And a composition forgotten by time. In the right hands and with careful eyes, that overlooked cent becomes something more, a portal into the secret history of modern minting, where even in the most mechanized age, human oversight, chance, and curiosity can combine to reveal extraordinary value. In 1995, the United States Mint was still running the Lincoln Memorial Cent series with a rhythm that had become second nature after decades of production. The Lincoln cent had remained visually unchanged on its obverse since 1909, and its reverse, showing the stately Lincoln Memorial, had been in place since 1959. By this point, coinage production was efficient, streamlined, and operating under tight standards. The Denver Mint, represented by the small d mint mark, was responsible for producing hundreds of millions of pennies that year, each intended to be a flawless representation of American consistency. And yet, somewhere in that tightly run system, a slip occurred, one subtle enough to escape attention but significant enough to echo through the numismatic world in the years to come. The process of striking coins involves several stages of precision. From the design on the master die to the working hub and then the working dies, each layer must align perfectly. A disturbance at any point can cause a doubling, a slight misalignment between impressions that results in design elements appearing twice. Most of these double dies are so minor they're undetectable without magnification, often dismissed by even experienced eyes. But once in a while, a bold, unmistakable doubling escapes the mint unnoticed. One day, years later, a modest collector named Brian from Arizona found himself searching through a mason jar of pennies handed down by his grandfather. Brian wasn't a professional numismatist, but he had a sharp eye and a growing fascination with error coins. Each cent he held carried the scent of age and circulation. Many were common dates, worn thin from decades of pocket travel. But one, dated 1995 and marked with a small d, stood out, not because of its color or condition, but because the word liberty on the obverse seemed off. The letters looked slightly doubled, especially the B and the D. Not blurred, not scratched, but shadowed, as though struck twice from a slightly different angle. He paused, examining it under a 10x loop. The doubling continued on the motto, "In God We Trust." It was cleaner than machine doubling. Crisp and layered. A possible double die. Yet, Brian had heard of the famous 1995 double die cent, only he thought those came from the Philadelphia Mint, not Denver. Every resource he had seen mentioned the 1995 P variety as the one to watch. But this was a 1995 D. A Denver strike. And there were no reports of a significant double die for that mint mark. Or were there? He posted a picture to an online collectors forum, expecting a shrug or a dismissal. Instead, his post drew comments of fascination, speculation, and doubt. Some thought it might be a new variety. Others believed it was a rare error that had been quietly documented but never confirmed. A few hardened collectors scoffed, assuming it was mechanical doubling, worthless. Brian wasn't sure either, but he was determined to find out. He sent the coin to a grading service. The wait stretched for weeks. When it returned, it came sealed in a transparent slab, and the label read, 1995 D Lincoln Cent, Double Die Obverse, FS 101. FS 101. The first recognized major double die for that issue. The coin had officially entered the numismatic lexicon as a legitimate error. The Denver Mint had indeed struck a limited number of pennies that year with a double die, and few had survived, or even been noticed. News spread. Slowly, other collectors began inspecting their 1995 D cents. Most found nothing unusual. A few, however, located similar doubling, but rarely as clean or as prominent as Brian's. Auction houses began watching the market. The early years saw modest bidding. Error collectors were intrigued but hesitant. The coin was rare, yes, but its fame hadn't yet reached the levels of the 1955 double die or even the more widely known 1995 P version, but as time went on and the number of confirmed 1995 D double die cents remained minuscule, their value began to climb. Coin journals started publishing side-by-side comparisons of the Philadelphia and Denver varieties. The 1995 P was bold and more dramatic, but the Denver error was elusive, understudied, undercollected, and potentially even rarer. That sense of hidden scarcity began to change everything. Collectors who had once focused only on the more visible errors turned their attention to subtler, harder to find anomalies. The 1995 D double die cent became a test of skill, a quiet challenge passed among experts. Find one, authenticate it, and you'd own a part of minting history that almost slipped away unnoticed. And as demand rose, so did value. The price for examples in circulated condition began to rise steadily, first a few $100s, then climbing past the $1,000 mark. Mint state specimens, especially those with full red luster, began appearing in auctions with reserve prices previously reserved for high-profile error coins. Brian's original discovery, regraded later at MS65RD, was eventually auctioned in a private sale. The final price was never officially disclosed, but insiders estimate it fetched well over $10,000. That same coin, some experts argue, could demand even more today, but the true twist in the story came when another collector in Oregon uncovered a near-identical 1995 D double die cent, except this one wasn't on a standard zinc planchet. It had been struck on a copper alloy blank, similar to those used pre-1982. Initial skepticism was intense. The idea that not only a double die but an off-metal error occurred in the same year and mint was hard to swallow. Yet the metallurgical tests confirmed it. The planchet was bronze. Whether it had been a leftover or an errant foreign blank was unclear. But the coin existed. A double error, a double die struck on a wrong planchet, the value of such a piece? Impossible to pin down. Some suggested it could exceed six figures if sold at the right auction. Others believed it would never leave the collector's possession. Today, the 1995 D double die cent remains one of the most intriguing modern penny errors. It lacks the fame of the 1955 and the drama of the 1999 wide AM or the 1982 small date bronze. But it sits quietly in collections and auctions, a reminder that even in an age of high-speed presses and industrial accuracy, the smallest misalignment can ripple through time, turn pocket change into treasure, and elevate the ordinary into the extraordinary. In 1980, the United States was standing at the threshold of a technological and economic shift. Inflation loomed over the nation, tensions flared overseas, and the value of raw materials, including copper, began to weigh heavily on the U.S. Mint. The Lincoln cent, still bearing the memorial reverse design and the iconic profile of Abraham Lincoln introduced in 1909, had already undergone several behind-the-scenes adjustments through the years. By now, the cent was predominantly composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc, though the pressure to find a cheaper composition was increasing with every fiscal quarter. In the midst of this carefully managed production cycle, an unexpected anomaly slipped past the layers of inspection and quality control. The Denver Mint, a central player in that year's penny production, was known for its consistent output. Yet even the most efficient machinery, when run long enough, makes mistakes. These errors, however minor, occasionally become whispers in the ears of coin collectors decades later, drawing them into deeper searches. One such whisper began to take form in a coin roll hunter's basement in Ohio, years after the coin had entered circulation. A collector named Dennis was never in it for the money. Coins, to him, were relics of untold stories, hidden in pockets, drawers, and boxes across the country. He sifted through hundreds of pennies weekly, his magnifier always within reach, his notebook filled with dates, mint marks, and little notes like "check later" and "odd finish." It was a Saturday evening, the kind where the world quiets down just enough to let small discoveries shout a little louder. He cracked open a roll labeled Miscellanea 70s to 80s, and started his usual pattern of examination. The 1980 penny that rolled into his hand had the deep, reddish hue of a copper coin that had aged in storage. It was clean, not brilliant, but well preserved. Yet when his eye focused on the obverse, something was off. The mint mark, the tiny D that signified Denver, looked unusual. It was not flat and sharp as it should have been. It had a slight doubling, a sort of shadow effect. Not machine doubling. This was something else. The 8 in the date also seemed swollen at the center, as if part of it had been struck again. That he paused, looked again, and then under magnification, confirmed what he thought might be true. There were clear, raised secondary impressions around the letters of Liberty and In God We Trust. It wasn't extreme, nothing like the infamous 1955 double die, but it was evident. And curious. He flipped it to examine the reverse. While not as prominent, even the word 1 seemed to carry faint ghosting along the edges. Could it be a double die on both sides? Dennis compared it to several other 1980 cents in his collection. None showed similar signs. His fingers trembled slightly as he reached for his reference books and error coin catalogs. Most of them listed the 1980 cent as uneventful, massive mintage, no known major errors. But there was one obscure mention, buried in a collector's forum thread from years earlier, possible 1980 minor double die obv. Unconfirmed. Only one known. That was all. No image. No follow-up. Unable to shake the feeling that he had stumbled onto something meaningful, Dennis sent the coin for professional grading and attribution. The weeks crawled by. He busied himself with other coins, but nothing gave him the same rush. When the package finally returned, sealed in protective plastic, he opened it with the delicate urgency of a surgeon. The label read, 1980 D1C, double die obverse, $58 Australian. The grade wasn't perfect, but the attribution was. Soon, more collectors began checking their own 1980 cents. A few faint examples trickled in, but none with the clarity of Dennis's find. Experts began suspecting that a single working die at the Denver Mint might have briefly suffered a misalignment in 1980, resulting in a micro-run of pennies with a subtle, legitimate double die. These coins, nearly impossible to distinguish without careful scrutiny, had likely gone unnoticed for decades. The market, initially skeptical, responded slowly. Early sales of similar coins brought in just over $100. But as the term 1980 double die obverse began appearing more frequently in error coin discussions and grading databases, curiosity turned into desire. The scarcity of examples in mint state fueled speculation. Could this be one of those rare varieties that gains value not because of dramatic visuals, but because of how cleverly it eluded discovery? In just a few short years, the value of Dennis's coin rose tenfold. Collectors who previously ignored 1980 cents entirely now eyed every roll from that year with new intent. A coin that had once passed through countless hands unnoticed was now being treated like a prize in treasure hunts, magnifiers dancing across the fields and devices of Lincoln's profile. But the twist, the one that elevated this coin from a minor curiosity to a cornerstone of modern penny errors, came in a quarterly report issued by an independent numismatic researcher. A separate batch of 1980 cents showed not only doubling but unusual planchet composition. While the official specifications called for the usual 95% copper alloy, metallurgical tests on a handful of these coins revealed trace amounts of nickel and tin not consistent with standard blanks. The theory suggested that in early 1980, the Denver Mint may have accidentally struck a small quantity of cents on experimental planchets or recycled foreign coin blanks. The combination of double die and off-metal planchet catapulted the coin's intrigue to an entirely new level. One example, confirmed to have both characteristics and graded MS63RD, sold in a private auction for nearly $19,000. And yet, even among collectors, the story was barely known. It hadn't yet reached the mainstream of numismatic fame, making it even more alluring to those who hunted for it. Today, the 1980 double die penny remains a symbol of mystery in the world of error coins. Its doubling is delicate, almost shy, as if it doesn't want to be seen too quickly. But for those who find it, for those who pause long enough to look deeper, it becomes something much more than a cent. It becomes a connection to a hidden error, a rare dance of machine and metal that tells a story few knew to listen for. And as each new collector uncovers one more piece of the puzzle, its legend quietly grows.